I was there the night the lights almost went out on live television. Not from a brownout, not from a blown breaker, not from some intern tripping over a thick black cable, but from a single sheet of 24-pound watermarked cream-white stock that had been folded exactly 3 times and slipped inside a plain number 10 envelope the color of old bones. I was there when the envelope changed hands, when it passed from the inside pocket of a senator's rumpled suit coat to the surface of a maple veneer desk that had been lacquered so many times it reflected the overhead scoops like an ice rink under midday sun. I was there when the glue flap lifted, just a whisper, a dry kiss, a crack so soft you could mistake it for a heartbeat, and when the paper inside exhaled, giving up the ghost of whatever rehearsal had happened in a hotel room 6 hours earlier. I was there for the 97 minutes that followed, the way you are there when a plane drops 300 feet in clear air turbulence and your stomach keeps flying without you. I was there for the hush that was not silence, but negative sound, an anti-noise, a vacuum that sucked every decibel into itself until the studio AC, ordinarily a distant D-flat drone, roared like a 747 spooling up for takeoff. I was there for the copper taste, the adrenal mist, the moment when 23 mortals realized they were watching a live vivisection, and the only anesthetic was the soft baritone of a man who had decided years earlier that the last thing he would ever do in public life was raise his voice. They tell you television is a visual medium. They lie. That night it was a haptic medium, a full-body instrument. The tremble in the parquet floor when the Congresswoman's heel shifted, the micro-vibration traveling up the tubular aluminum leg of the host's stool, the subsonic thud of a ratings needle slamming so hard against the far end of the dial that the glass cracked somewhere in a sub-basement rack no viewer will ever see. I felt it in my molars. I felt it in the floating ribs. I felt it in the place where language goes to die and is reborn as memory. Let me take you back, step by step, breath by breath, synapse by misfiring synapse, because the clip you saw was a ghost, a 2-dimensional postcard from a 4-dimensional catastrophe. The cameras missed the sweat that beaded behind the Congresswoman's left ear and rolled in perfect capillary time down the rim of her crimson jacket collar. The cameras missed the way the senator's thumb paused on the fold of the paper. 1,000, 1,000, like a card shark giving the mark one last chance to fold. The cameras missed the white-knuckle grip of the segment producer on my shoulder, fingernails through polyester, a 5-fingered vice that said, "If you so much as clear your throat, I will end your career in the same breath I use to summon security." The cameras missed the moment when the teleprompter operator, a 22-year-old from Pensacola, who still carried a laminated St. Michael prayer in his badge lanyard, whispered "Mother of God" so quietly that the words traveled backwards through his headset and into the control room, where they landed in the middle of a commercial countdown grid like a hand grenade with the pin already pulled. Date stamp, January 5th, 2026. Location, Studio 3B, 6th Avenue, Manhattan. The same room where Cronkite once blinked back tears, and where, 3 decades later, a reality show billionaire learned that a live feed will not protect you from your own tongue. The set designers had gone for civic warmth. Burnished walnut, brushed steel, 2 flags, stars and stripes, POW MIA, angled just enough to catch the key light, a carpet the color of dried blood that would hide coffee spills and worse. The audience bleachers held 64 souls, every seat filled, every wristband RFID tagged, every phone sealed in a gray pouch that could survive a shotgun blast. They had been told they were attending a national conversation on public education. They had not been told they were attending an exorcism. Tapper, graying, tailored, caffeinated to the gills, opened with the word civility, stretching the second syllable like taffy, the same way he had practiced it in the mirror at 4:12 that morning, while his toddler daughter slept in the next room, and his wife snored softly into a silk eye mask. He had written the intro on an index card, then rewritten it on a thicker card because the first one trembled like a leaf in his left hand. He was 2 sentences in when Congresswoman Jessica Omar, red headband, red blazer, red bottoms that could slice deli meat, shot out of her chair like a carnival target, spine straight, shoulders squared, voice pitched to the exact frequency that makes dog whistles jealous. Take an IQ test, Kennedy. 4 words. 4 seconds. A laugh burst out of her like glass marbles hitting terrazzo, high and bright and sharp enough to shave skin. The studio lights bounced off her incisors, each tooth a tiny lighthouse warning ships away from rocks that were, at that exact moment, still invisible. Senator John Kennedy, Louisiana drawl, suit the color of storm clouds, eyes the weary shade of a man who has buried more constituents than he has shook hands with, tilted his head 1 degree, the same angle a barn owl uses before deciding whether the mouse gets to live another heartbeat. He tapped the envelope once, a dry, papery thunk, the sound of permission being granted. "I've been called worse by better," he said, volume set to library reading room. "And I still slept fine. But since you asked for a test, let's test something bigger than memory. Let's test memory itself." He slid the envelope across the desk, maple on maple. A hockey puck on a shuffleboard court that suddenly felt as big as the continental shelf. Let's test who in this room has done their homework and who has simply memorized the slogans on the flashcards tucked inside their sleeve. Jessica straightened the bun that screamed discipline the way a drill sergeant screams bedtime. She listed degrees: Columbia, Stanford, a Rhodes that had taken her to Oxford, where she drank lukewarm cider and argued about Gramsci under Gothic stone. She listed peer-reviewed papers, 12, 14, I lost count, each title longer than a CVS receipt. She listed classrooms she had toured, teachers she had Instagrammed, districts where her signature had landed on bricks, and books and Band-Aids. She finished with the line that was supposed to be the coup de grace. "You cannot govern what you cannot quantify, and you cannot quantify what you cannot understand. And you, Senator, sound like you understand very little." She sat back, spine still steel, but the corner of her mouth twitched, half triumph, half terror, because she knew, the way a surfer knows the shape of a rogue wave even before it blocks out the sun, that the ocean had just stood up and was now staring at her. Kennedy nodded the way a coroner nods when the cause of death is no longer mysterious. He lifted the flap. The glue cracked like a chicken bone snapped for marrow. The paper inside was heavy stock, watermarked. Letterhead from the Institute for Cognitive Evaluation, Cambridge, Massachusetts. The same font used for diplomas and death certificates. The date stamp, 6 days old. The signature, cobalt ink, looped with the lazy confidence of a man who still writes real thank-you notes. The numbers, 98th percentile across every category that matters: verbal, spatial, analytical, working memory, executive function, the full cognitive stack. The kind of score that gets you into Mensa without knocking. The kind of score that ends bar fights without raising a voice. The kind of score that fits inside a number 10 envelope and still weighs more than a neutron star. He read it aloud, once, never gloating, never glancing at her, never raising his voice above funeral volume. Then he folded the paper along the original crease, the way a veteran folds a flag until it is only triangles and stars, and slid it back into the envelope. He set the envelope between them like a bridge that had just been dynamited and rebuilt in the same gesture. 37 seconds ago, you asked for an IQ test. Consider this the answer you ordered, the data you demanded, the evidence you requested, and the silence you are now wearing like a necklace. The American people just watched you confuse confidence with capability, and the bill for that confusion has just come due. The studio went so quiet, the air conditioning ducts sounded like jet engines spooling up on a carrier deck. Jesse Waters, guest hosting from the far end of the desk, forgot to breathe. I watched the color drain from his cheeks, like sand slipping through an hourglass made of skin. In the control room, a producer whispered, "Holy crap," into an open mic, and the words traveled backwards through the IFB system and into every earpiece on set, a tiny profanity looping around the world like a prayer in reverse. Camera 3's tally light stayed solid red, a predator eye that never blinked, and in that light, Jessica's royal blue blazer looked suddenly darker, the color of sky just before the tornado drops its rope. She parted her lips, but no syllable arrived. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then to the camera lens, then to the exit sign glowing above the audience like an angel that had lost its wings, then back to the envelope, as if the paper might suddenly sprout wings and lift her out of the moment it had created. Tappert tried to steer back to education policy, but his voice cracked like a 14-year-old asking for a prom date, and the words education policy sounded obscene after what we had just witnessed, like talking about upholstery while the Titanic's deck tilts toward the star-drunk Atlantic. The audience did not applaud. They did not boo. They simply sat frozen in the shared realization that we had all just seen a career detonate in real time, and the shrapnel was still suspended mid-air, waiting for gravity to remember its job. I felt the producer's grip release my shoulder. The 5 white ovals of her fingernails stayed imprinted for the next 48 hours, a temporary tattoo that read, "You will never unsee this." The segment ended without a handshake. Jessica left the stage first, steps quick but not quick enough to escape camera 3, which followed her all the way to the velvet curtain where she paused half a second too long. And in that half second, the internet was born. The GIFs, the memes, the hashtags, #envelope face, #98, receipts, the slow-motion replays, the split-screen reaction videos, the sound bites, the sticker packs, the ringtones, the remixes, the think pieces, the op-eds, the late show jokes, the morning show damage control, the emergency meetings, the crisis PR calls, the sponsor pullouts, the network apologies, the viewer polls, the trending tab, the algorithmic push, the forced viral, the organic viral, the backlash to the backlash, the think piece about the think pieces, and underneath it all, the original silence still humming like a tuning fork no one has figured out how to monetize yet. I walked out into the January night behind the studio, the alley smelling of wet cardboard and broken dreams, and I passed a dumpster where a royal blue blazer had been stuffed collar up, as if it might still zip itself back into confidence and march back onto set. But the fabric just flapped in the wind like a flag that had surrendered, and no one had bothered to lower yet. I knew then what I had always suspected. Washington is full of envelopes waiting to be opened, and full of people who think they will never be the one inside, and that the city runs on the hubris of those who believe they can out-talk a piece of paper that weighs less than 1 gram but carries more gravity than a black hole. The next morning, the clip had already looped 1 billion times. The word 98 trended above Super Bowl, above celebrity breakup, above natural disaster. In every iteration, the same half-second of silence appeared right after the numbers were read, like a skipped heartbeat in the national arrhythmia. And in that pause, a generation of viewers learned the difference between volume and velocity, between noise and knowledge, between the echo and the answer. Somewhere in a dorm room, a kid who had never cared about supply and demand Googled marginal tax rates. Somewhere in a diner, a waitress who had never cared about politics asked her customer what 98th percentile actually means. Somewhere in a newsroom, a producer who had built a career on outrage segments stared at the royal blue blazer hanging on the back of her door and wondered how many envelopes she had left unopened, and how many of them already had her name typed neatly across the front. The senator flew home to Baton Rouge the next day, walked into a parish library that smelled of old paper and new coffee, and spent 2 hours drawing supply and demand curves on a whiteboard for high schoolers who had never seen a graph move without a glitch effect overlay. When he finished, they applauded longer than the studio audience had, because they recognized something the studio had missed: that intelligence without arrogance is the rarest currency in America, and that sometimes the most devastating mic drop is the one that never raises its voice above library level, and that the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line. It is a single sheet of paper inside a manila envelope, waiting patiently for the moment someone mistakes confidence for capability and dares the envelope to speak. The envelope did not speak again that night. It did not need to. Its testimony had already echoed through fiber optic veins and into the marrow of the Republic. But the echo refused to fade. It grew legs, lungs, a heartbeat that thumped inside every newsroom, every dorm, every diner, every ride share, every bar that played the clip on loop behind the counter while patrons ordered another round just to have an excuse to sit still and listen to the silence that followed the numbers. Because that silence was new, it was a species of quiet no one had catalogued before. It was the sound of a narrative being dismantled bolt by bolt, rivet by rivet, and the tools doing the dismantling were nothing more exotic than a single sheet of paper and a voice that never rose above funeral volume. I rode the subway home, the car packed shoulder to shoulder, but no one spoke. They stared at their phones, watched the clip again, watched her face, watched the tap of the envelope, watched the fold of the paper, watched the half-second where her pupils dilated like elevator doors that had just been told the cable was cut. And in that half-second, the entire car shared a communal inhale no one measured, no one monetized, no one uploaded. It was simply air being borrowed and returned in the same instant. And yet the temperature of the car dropped by a fraction of a degree, enough that condensation formed on the windows and someone traced a small question mark with their finger, then erased it before the next stop. By dawn, the royal blue blazer had become a meme template. The internet overlaid it with flames, with dumpsters, with train wrecks, with sinking ships, with the words, "I was told there would be policy," and the images spread faster than any apology, faster than any fact-check, faster than any contextual paragraph, because images do not need permission. They simply arrive and settle and colonize the eye, and the eye remembers what it sees longer than what the ear hears. And the eye had seen the moment when confidence became collateral damage, and the eye would not forget. Inside the network, Jessica's team convened at 6 a.m. in a conference room that smelled of cold pizza and panic. They had 4 hours before her scheduled hit on the morning show, 4 hours to craft a response that could retroactively armor her dignity. They tried every angle: the sexism angle, the elitism angle, the out-of-context angle, the light-hearted joke gone wrong angle. None of them fit the shape of the hole that had been blown through her brand, and by 9:42 a.m. they surrendered. They told her to stay home, to rest, to let the story cycle out by lunch. But the story did not cycle out. The story had found a permanent parking spot in the national conversation, and it refused to vacate. Kennedy, meanwhile, landed in Baton Rouge carrying no envelope, no flashcards, only the same calm that had carried him through the night. He walked into a public library that smelled of old paper and new coffee, asked for a whiteboard and a blue marker, and spent 2 hours drawing lines that intersected and diverged and converged again, while teenagers who had never voted watched him turn numbers into a story that made sense. When he finished, they applauded, because they had never seen sense make sense before. They had only seen sense become noise. And for the first time they understood that policy was not a punchline. Policy was a graph you could hold in your hand, and the graph did not care what color your blazer was. The graph went viral too, but it went viral slowly, like frost across a window, like moss across a stone, viral the way knowledge used to travel before knowledge needed to be trending. It traveled by word of mouth, by screenshot, by teacher who printed it and taped it to the bulletin board, by student who copied it into a notebook and underlined the part where marginal tax rates intersected with take-home pay, and realized that math was not a weapon. Math was a mirror, and the mirror reflected what you actually earned and what you actually kept. And for the first time, many of them asked why no one had ever shown them the mirror before. In Washington, the freshman Democrat, who represented a district that had flipped by less than 1%, opened his laptop, searched for whiteboard videos, searched for supply and demand, searched for how to explain GDP without putting the audience to sleep, searched for how to speak in paragraphs that did not end with a scare, searched for how to be the person who brought the envelope before someone asked for it. He practiced in the mirror until his wife told him to go to bed, until the dog whined to be let out, until the words felt like they belonged to him and not to the teleprompter, and when he walked into his first town hall after the clip, he carried a manila envelope of his own. It was empty, but it was present, and the presence was enough to make the room sit up a little straighter. The Republican staffer who had printed the transcript on glossy cardstock for donor mailers printed more, hundreds, thousands, until the printer overheated, and the intern brought her ice water, and she handed them out at county fairs, at fish fries, at football games, at Rotary clubs, and she watched the faces of voters who had never cared about percentile. Anything suddenly light up with the recognition that someone they liked had been told he was dumb and had replied with silence and paper and numbers that needed no translation. And she realized that the envelope was not just a prop. It was a permission slip, a license to say, "I told you so," without ever saying it out loud. The meditation app that had bought ad space during the clip saw downloads spike by 18%. The company's CBO bragged in a deck that the senator had lowered the cost per install by teaching America that clarity is priceless. And the marketing team put that sentence on a slide and put the slide on the internet. And no one asked if clarity was actually priceless, or if clarity was simply the absence of noise, and the absence of noise was suddenly a product you could bottle and sell for $4.99 a month with a 7-day free trial and a pop-up that asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel?" The word 98th became a sticker, a ringtone, a meme, a graduation cap decoration, a Father's Day mug, a cross-stitch pattern, a gospel choir riff, a pickup line, a password, a safe word, a tattoo in tiny Helvetica on the inside of a wrist that no camera would ever see, but the wearer would feel every time the pulse jumped. And the wearer would remember that somewhere in America, a man had opened a piece of paper and had ended an argument without raising his voice. And the wearer would carry that memory into job interviews, into first dates, into hospital rooms, into voting booths, and the memory would do its quiet work. It would steady the hand, it would slow the breath, It would widen the lens, and the wearer would never know that the steadiness had begun in a subway car at 11:47 p.m. when a stranger had watched another stranger's confidence collapse in real time and had decided to exhale instead of laugh. The silence that began in the studio did not stay in the studio. It leaked, it seeped, it traveled, it commuted, it rode Amtrak, it rode Uber, it rode the red eye, it rode the school bus, it rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. It rode the escalator down into the metro. It rode the escalator up into the food court. It rode the conveyor belt at TSA. It rode the baggage claim carousel. It rode the luggage cart. It rode the trunk. It rode the back seat. It rode the rearview mirror. And it stared at every driver who stared back. And it asked the same question without moving its lips. Are you sure you belong here? Are you sure you can prove it? Are you sure you want to find out what happens if you cannot? And that is how a sheet of paper smaller than a dinner napkin rewrote the rules of engagement. That is how a single sheet of paper taught a generation that receipts beat rage, that silence beats sarcasm, that preparation beats performance, that data beats drama, that calm beats chaos, that a whisper can outlast a hurricane, and that the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line. It is a manila envelope placed on a desk and left unopened until the exact moment when someone mistakes your silence for surrender and dares you to open it. And you do, and the room goes quiet, and the quiet never really leaves. It just keeps traveling. It just keeps walking. It just keeps breathing. It just keeps beating inside every chest that ever watched the clip. And ever since that night, whenever I feel my own pulse skip, I feel the paper rustle. I feel the glue crack. I feel the numbers rise. And I remember that the most dangerous weapon in American politics is not a tweet. It is not a rally. It is not a scandal. It is not a slogan. It is a single sheet of paper inside a plain envelope waiting patiently for the moment when confidence forgets to check its corners and dares the envelope to speak. And when it does, the room goes quiet, and the quiet wins. And the quiet kept winning. Long after the studio lights cooled and the maple veneer desk was wheeled back into storage. Long after the royal blue blazer was fished out of the dumpster and hung in an intern's closet, like a war trophy nobody wanted to claim. It won in the hush that fell over freshman orientation at the Kennedy School when a professor played the 37-second clip, and the entire lecture hall forgot to check Instagram for a full 3 minutes. It won in the Capitol cloakroom, where interns now carried empty manila envelopes, the way previous generations carried cigarettes. Something to fiddle with, something to remind them they were mortal. It won in the voicemail inbox of a crisis PR firm where the first message began, "Hi, I think I need an envelope strategy." And the last message ended with a soft click that sounded exactly like paper sliding across wood. I went back to Studio 3B 1 year later, on the exact anniversary, at the exact minute. They were taping a cooking segment, tacos, fusion, something pink and green that bubbled. The set smelled of cilantro and lime and the disinfectant they used to scrub shame off laminate. Camera 3 was still there, its red tally light dark, but when I stared into the lens, I saw the reflection of a maple desk that no longer existed. And for a moment, the copper taste came back, sharp as a new penny under the tongue. I left before security asked questions, the same way I left the alley a year earlier. Walking fast, shoulders in, pockets deep, carrying nothing but the memory of a fold that will never unfold. Somewhere tonight, a kid in a dorm room is printing a fake score report on heavy stock cream paper, just to see what it feels like to hold quiet in his hand. Somewhere a senator is practicing the tilt of his head in a mirror that has seen more lies than truth. Somewhere, A congresswoman is burning through red fabric swatches, searching for a shade that does not remind her of dilated pupils and elevator doors. And somewhere, maybe in a parish library that still smells of old paper and new coffee, maybe on a subway car rocking through the tunnel beneath 6th Avenue, maybe in the alley behind a studio where the dumpsters still smell of wet cardboard and broken dreams, a plain number 10 envelope is waiting, patient as a monk, for the next person confident enough to mistake volume for velocity, the next person brave enough to dare it to speak. The envelope does not care who you are. The envelope does not care what you wear. The envelope does not care how loud you laugh, how fast you stand, how many syllables you can fit into 4 seconds flat. The envelope only cares that you are ready to pay the bill when the paper unfolds and the numbers rise and the room goes quiet. And the quiet, oh, the quiet, keeps walking, keeps breathing, keeps beating inside the national marrow forever, like a second heart you never asked for but can't live without. I was there the night the lights almost went out on live television, and I have been there every night since, because the moment the paper spoke, the world split into before envelope and after envelope, and after is a country you can never leave. You don't need a passport, you don't need permission, you only need to remember that the most dangerous weapon in America is still the one that weighs less than a gram, carries no serial number, and travels in the breast pocket of a rumpled suit coat, waiting for the exact heartbeat when confidence forgets to knock. So, if you ever find yourself under the lights, under the lenses, under the weight of a question you think you can outrun, reach into your pocket first. Ask yourself, do I have the receipt? Do I have the page? Do I have the number that ends the conversation before it begins? If the answer is no, sit down, shut up, and start studying. Because somewhere in the dark, the envelope is already breathing, and the quiet is already on its way, and it does not tire, it does not blink, it does not forgive. It simply wins. And when it wins, the room does not applaud. It exhales, a single communal breath that sounds exactly like the soft, dry kiss of paper sliding across wood, a sound so small you could miss it if you weren't listening for the rest of your life.